You can already see. All right, we are live. I am hoping that I can say some hi, hello from our students. Usually, it takes 1 minute for it to go to YouTube. Let me just read what all is going on. How was the exam? Exam was tough.
Yeah, so a lot of nervousness, tension creeping up with kids. And those who are already joined, I would request put your comments in the chat box so that we will be able to see that, revert back, and we have the great Jijo directly talking to you. He's just taken the session, so we'll wait for another 20-30 seconds. Jijo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, we are live. I think that by the time the kid sees us, it'll take that 20-30 seconds for them to see.
Yeah.
Um, So, hello everyone. Welcome to this session. Today we're going to discuss the slot two analysis. So, this is based on our internal discussion that we had as a team. Obviously, we will get to know about slot three a little later, and then we'll get a little more data. We'll fine tune it based on the input that we get also from the students. And the more you input your scores, and we'll get to know what's the story. And I have with me Rohan and Gautam. They'll help me through. All of us have taken slot two, and slot two was obviously the personally very painful slot for me. It's like 12:30 to 2:30. Like, when do I have lunch? Uh, so let's start with the start with. I hope that you log on to careerlauncher.com/CAD. We have already put up. We'll keep putting analysis. You can put an estimate in terms of your attempts and your percentage accuracy. We can give you a good estimate in terms of what is a percentile, because then if we had more and more input, we'll get more and more data to make a good sense. So before I start, I want to hear from Rohan and Gautam in terms of from a overall take of the slot number two. What was it? Uh,
Yeah, Gautam sir, you go first.
Okay, my take on this would be probably much closer to what we were having the cat in 2021. So all the three sections were pretty close to it. The overall probably the difficulty would fall by a question or two, because LRDI I would say is last year four question sets. The two four question sets were pretty attemptable. So a person who's targeting 95% and above was probably was able to take their two sets. But इसमें there was one set that was easier, that was on revenue and cost. The other sets we had to struggle. Probably a 99 percentiler could be able to get 10 plus questions, but 95 percentiler or probably a person who is scoring little low or probably targeting little low could be getting little less marks. So almost probably -1 or -2 question from last year CAT in terms of LIDI. Quantitative ability, my first take was almost 9 question on arithmetic. 5 to 6 were easier. Algebra, 2 or 3 questions were easier. Geometry, again, 1 or 2 was easier. So overall, person targeting 99 should be around 30 to 32 marks. That should be my first take for the examination.
yeah, Rohan,
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah, I would agree to him. I mean, verbal, as the lines of what we were taking CDC is our countdown mocks. It was having one octopus passage, but I could feel was doable. Though it has those dot, so that was quite scary. It seems like it is an mixed idea passage. But yeah, there were philosophy. There was that musicy. So I enjoyed that fill in the blanks question instead of or sentence one. So overall, verbal was on the lines of what paper is coming from the last 3-4 years. I would say not very difficult. I would say not very easy. Moderate to difficult could be the difficulty level as per the first impression. Talking about LRDI, if you are stuck in that FDA EU वाला set, तो फिर और वो नहीं बना, so मरे. ठीक है, because it was time consuming. Many of the students might have felt that इसमें data ही missing है, इसमें आधा data दिया हुआ है, but then data was complete. You could have done that easily. That plot वाला set was easy. You could have done that. थोड़ा सा time consumer था, जहाँ पर profits दिया हुआ था, cost and revenue and those set. That was a DI set, but yeah, very much achievable. Somebody could have easily got that particular set. Uh, apart from that, if I say typically, अगर मैं बात कर रहा हूँ कि कॉन्ट की बात करते हैं हम लोग, सो कॉन्ट में डेफिनेटली देयर वर फ्यू क्वेश्चंस व्हिच आर सिटर्स, व्हिच यू कुड हैव which we could have easily cracked down. ठीक है, quant में arithmetic was dominating purely. Even geometry questions were not very difficult, I would say. One question from permutation combination I could recall 2000 से ज़्यादा कितने number of distinct बनेगा, so that was one question I could see. Again, doable. I mean, if you calculate it, if you are good at numbers, you will be able to do that. Algebra was there, around 4 or 5 questions, indirectly or directly, were algebra functions. There was one question on log. So overall, if I say, the level of difficulty would be as par at par with the previous year cats. Yeah, over to you,
Okay.
Jijo.
So let's. So what we'll do is we'll go broadly about overall structure. We'll go to each of these section, and then we'll give you in terms of what would be our estimate at this point in time in terms of score versus percentile at various level. So overall structure wise, you see that it was exactly like last year. The only difference was in BRC there was only 3 non-MCQ question. The odd question was out, right? And 40 minutes we are putting it about easy to moderate. This is easy to moderate, which will be very similar to our easy to moderate estimate would be very similar to last year. But I'm probably looking at, and we'll discuss that, maybe slightly, maybe one question less or 3 marks less in terms of what would have happened last year, especially with the fact that you suddenly saw a new set of question, and then you had to handle it. uh, DLR in general would be difficult. You had to fight. And that's what everybody was discussing. There was probably one set which is on revenue and cost. The data was looking very ugly, but if you get the data out, it was straightforward. But the rest of them you had to find. Maths will be by more or less moderate. You had all variety of questions. Some of the questions were looking very deadly, but manageable. And this would be the total number of questions that you see. QS 24, is it? I thought 22. Was it 24?
No, it's 22 only.
Huh. Okay. So just just that minor error.
Even
So we
even
are making
LRDI
all.
is 5 questions. LRDI is 20. 5, 5,
Uh,
5 in each.
yeah. Okay. So we have. I think that this was like quick PPT. So this was 4 into 5. That is 20 questions. This is 22 questions. So 68 exactly last year. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me start with reading comprehension. There was this one passage. This music king is one word, by the way. Okay. So at least the authors said that was about musicking. One passage about social institution, one passage in octopus, and one passage of engineering problem. The passage that was kind of, I mean, easy to read. I think engineering problem passage was easy to read. Octopus was easy to read, just that there were a lot of crazy terms that they had put in, and some people who don't like passages like that would have found it slightly painful. But otherwise, it was an easy read. Other two passage I would put at moderate. The only problem would have been just by looking at the word philosophy in the first paragraph, one sentence, somebody would have gone, but otherwise it was 500, roughly about 500 words. So passage, if we invest time in each of these passages, the passages was manageable. And of course, you obviously would have had the normal struggle that you had with some of these passages here. What I also found in this particular paper was you had, once you get hold of the passage, every sort of passage offered you 2 to 3 questions, which was manageable. uh, there were, of course, in most of the cases, most of the questions were manageable, but for sure there might be a couple of questions which had got painful options across the passages. But two questions, 3 questions, 2 to 3 questions in every passage was there for the taking. If you were to if you are able to understand the particular passage. Moving and going to the one, this was this paragraph completion. Actually, this was not sort of tough. It is just that it was different. Whatever was the logic, that it's very similar to the logic of paragraph jumble, which means you're looking at where do I place this particular sentence, what's the coherence. In one sense it was more or less the same, but I'm guessing what would have happened is that you've seen for the first time, you didn't want to try it, maybe you left it towards the end, and maybe some people would have missed it. So there is that question mark with respect to how people dealt with these 2 questions. Paragraph summary, as usual, the options, you have to look for problems in the answer choices, And paragraph jumble also, I don't think, I think maybe one was confusing, two was more or less manageable. Overall, when I look at this verbal ability paper, this would be probably similar in terms of level of difficulty, type of questions, in reading comprehension, the passages, the scope, and the kind of dense level of the passage, the topic would be something that you are typically used to. So I don't think that, barring maybe these two questions of this paragraph completion, but by and large you'll find this particular paper very very similar to the ones that you've used to. So for those students who are prepared well for this particular section, verbal reading comprehension, may not have found this is that challenging. But I believe that, therefore, the percentile distribution, which will come to later, will be more or less the same. Anything you want to add, Gautam or Rohan, to what I said?
Uh, Gautam sir, you are on mute.
Sorry. So I believe it was more or less like what Jijo sir said was almost the same. Para completions probably was not very tricky. If probably would have spent time, would have been easy score. I believe Jijo sir.
हाँ 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 हाँ. I believe one of the paragraph jumble sentence was he करके शुरू किया था ना, and
हाँ
there was
जी.
only one person's name that was there.
Definitely.
So it
हाँ
was
तो वो little probably was easy to attempt. Then odd one out.
it was definitely easier to attempt than not, but then there's a question of negative marking, and I'm
हाँ
just
वो
saying that,
definitely.
Gautam, my point was, something new comes, you still have
हाँ
to
वो
figure out what the question is, you have to read, and
But
then you're
probably
thinking how to.
the second slot student were already prepared with this. Most of them already knew that there has to be a para completion question, which is going to be probably easier than odd one out. So that was the
Problem.
first instant that I got from slot two students.
Okay, all right. So
Yeah,
anyway,
probably, in that case, if you look at, even I feel कि OSPJ में आपको एक ऑप्शन, एक एक सेंटेंस हटाना होता है, इसमें लगाना है, कहाँ
correct.
फिट करना है वो, you have to judge that. So I mean, it was a new thing for slot 1, but for slot 2, almost 50-60% of the khufia agencies have given them the ideas, so probably they were mentally prepared, and that was also given कि it is coming a bit easier, and they were able to do that. So yeah, whatever Jijo sir said, absolutely, I think I agree to him. The passage difficulty level and everything was on the lines of the CAT paper. I mean, you cannot expect an easier paper than this in CAT, at least.
Yeah. That was the only thing. I think it was about investing time in the passage, understanding the passage. Then there were questions for the taking. I don't know how the students would have handled it. I'm sure that some of them would have felt some passage to be, prima facie looking at it difficult to read. But if you invest time, it was not that painful to read. It was my personal take from whatever cats that I've seen so far. Definitely, maybe I think slot number one had. I hear that there was one passage, which is one passage which was tough to read, but I don't think that that kind of pain was there in slot number two. Uh,
Definitely, sir.
go Going to DLR, I think my take was DLR is, this, what was it? Revenue cost. I think, this particular set. The only thing that
This
the
is
graph looked a little deadly. Okay, you had something on the left hand side, something left hand side, but I'm sure that by now, for those who are prepared for this particular test, and I'm sure that you would have handled such graph, and these were the question, out of which I think three were kind of straightforward, and two you had to do a little bit of basic calculation, and I think this was the five sets which was absolutely manageable. Correct, that's what
yes, yes.
my. Hmm. उसके बाद it was like थोड़ा मगजमारी. I think there was sort of one set which was on cosmetic item, ये था ना, which is like
हाँ जी, sir.
domestic and
FDA वाला,
uh, uh,
cosmetic and nutritious,
Twenty
nutrition.
product.
uh, I think इसमें there was 2 to 3 questions, I believe, that did not require too much of fight. It was by
Definitely,
my,
sir.
but they can do all questions required help, and then the rest too you required. It was nothing. I think compared to last year, I know, Rohan and Gautam. The last year, at least there were some sets, couple of sets. You looked at the set and said, "Okay, this I know how to move forward. I know how to manage this. I know the steps that you can do." I think here, that may not have happened. You had to sit for some time, figure out the process, and then nail it. Therefore, I think that compared to sort of last year, it would eventually turn out to be difficult. This is my feeling. This one, and given the fact that there was no 4-4-6-6, everything was fine. So I don't know how that will make a difference. So there was no advantage or disadvantage in the sense in quantum of questions, but I think that it was about people may get this five and may get one more. I don't know how many would have crossed more than three sets. Very unlikely. I'm sure that there might be some who would have done it, but I believe that here by and large it will be difficult. So long as you kept your cool and handle whatever question you could handle, I think you would probably do a good job. Yeah, Rohan Gautam. Yeah,
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Gautam, sir, you can
Definitely.
go first.
Revenue and cost was definitely doable. The first three questions was just talking about profit, so that would be the added advantage. Second, डायग्राम की जरूरत ही नहीं था. तो रेवेन्यू कॉस्ट का
correct.
अगर मैं कैलकुलेशन करके डिफरेंस निकाल के प्रॉफिट निकाल लेता, फर्स्ट थ्री क्वेश्चंस वर प्रोबेबली वेरी डुएबल. कॉस्मेटिक आइटम्स में मुझे पर्सनली काफी स्टूडेंट्स का लगा प्रॉबली वुड हैव मिसअंडरस्टूड विद सेट थ्योरी, जबकि उसमें
Correct.
सेट थ्योरी नहीं था. बिकॉज आइदर इट हैज टू बी कॉस्मेटिक और इट हैज टू बी न्यूट्रिशन, आइदर इट हैज टू बी डोमेस्टिक और हैज टू बी फॉरेन. बोथ वाला ऑप्शन नहीं था. तो पर्सनली प्रोबेबली स्टूडेंट्स उस पॉइंट को लेके कंफ्यूज हो गए, बहुत सारा टाइम स्पेंड कर जाएंगे कॉस्मेटिक वाले में सेट थ्योरी ड्रॉ करने के केस में, और वो शॉर्ट थ्योरी बनेगा नहीं. सो दैट वाज प्रोबेबली द ट्रिक इन कॉस्मेटिक. अदरवाइज उसके जो फर्स्ट थ्री क्वेश्चन से अगर बच्चा थोड़ा समझ लेता और उसको थोड़ा सा मैनेज कर लेता वाज अटेम्प्टेबल. सो इसमें अगर हम चॉइस ऑफ क्वेश्चन थोड़ा अच्छा रखते हैं, सो प्रोबेबली वुड हैव बीन एन ईजियर जॉब. Other two sets, diagram wala, probably the four destination network jo bana hua tha, that had a warehouse. Then there were four stores. We had the demand in
Distance.
those four stores,
Mm.
distances.
Yeah.
So the data was little complicated. Probably then you'll have to make some permutation and combinations. Where will you get that 250 ki delivery? Where you will get 270 ki delivery? So probably student was able to figure out कि वो maximum कितना है, minimum कितना, उसमें से कहाँ 250 बन रहा है, कहाँ 270 बन रहा है. So that was a little struggle that probably most of the student would be doing.
I
So
think one more
first,
thing about sorry Gautam, one more thing about this was the pehla. I think two questions were non MCQ also. So
yes,
Data.
and plus every question you had to fight. Well, every question you had to
definitely.
think about it. अभी यहाँ कहाँ नहीं. So
वो
this
कहाँ
was
से
sort
बनेगा
of
वो, how would you complete that 240? How would you complete that 210? So that was a struggle that probably was making it little difficult.
yeah.
Yeah, एग्जैक्टली आई वुड एग्री टू दैट. आई मीन आई थिंक जो रेवेन्यू कॉस्ट वाला सेट है जो छोड़ के आया है, ये देख के कि उसका डायग्राम खतरनाक है, वो तो अब रो रहा होगा. ठीक है, वो बिल्कुल छोड़ने लायक नहीं था. इट वाज अ सेट व्हिच हैज टू बी डन, बिकॉज बाकी के सेट्स को देखोगे तो इट इज क्वाइट कंफ्यूजिंग. जो कॉस्मेटिक वाला गौतम सर ने बात किया, आई वुड एग्री टू हिम कि वो सेट थ्योरी लग रहा है बट सेट थ्योरी है नहीं. इनफैक्ट उसमें कई बार ऐसा मैंने पहले भी कहा कि ऐसा लग रहा है कि कुछ डेटा मिसिंग है, देयर समथिंग व्हिच इज मिसिंग बट एवरीथिंग वाज गिवन एक्चुअली. अगर आप उसको ठीक से पढ़ेंगे, ठीक है, वो 320 का टोटल आना चाहिए. इट विल डेफिनेटली बी द सेम थिंग. सेल्समैन वाला सेट बाय द वे इट वाज डिफिकल्ट बट आई कुड मेक इट, बिकॉज वो इक्वेशंस अगर आप ठीक से बनाएंगे, अगर उसको एक टेबुलर फॉर्मेट में डाल दोगे सेल्समैन वाले को, जो हाउस होल्ड दिया है, आइटम दिया है, टोटल नंबर ऑफ आइटम्स इज 100 गिवन टू यू. ठीक है, इफ यू कैन मेक इट, अगर वो इक्वेशंस को इक्वेट कर दिया है, उसने एक बोला है कि एक बंदा जो है दूसरे बंदे का सक्सेस रेशो इक्वल रहता है, यू नो, एंड इन द सेकंड डे इट इज 75%. सो इफ यू कैन मेक दैट डेटा, I could do all the five here, right? Destination, as Jijo said, every question was an individual question in itself, so वो एक time consuming हो सकता है if you have understood the set. But yes, definitely if I say two sets would be sufficing enough to get you a good percentile.
Yeah, I think one of the problem is that if you make any error in the beginning of interpretation of this set, I think it's over. The four will
Yes,
go,
yes.
five will go. But here, so it was unlike the DIs that we are used to. I think that at least the institute decided, whichever who are the questions that decided, सब you fight to market लेके आओ. So एक दिया. Otherwise, I remember last year it was like two was straightforward, or two was okay. I think, and lot many people would have found the DLR to be difficult, but people who invested time would have actually cracked it, like everyone is saying. But it required that peace of mind and to invest the time, and then moving from DLR and not taking the burden to QA would have been very necessary and important for this test, because you never know at what percentile the scores at to what percentile it may the DLR scores may be down compared to what it was last year. So
And another point in the salesman wala set was the data was given in range, 10 or more, 21 to
hmm,
40. So it was not giving you an exact answer. Otherwise, we could have done the reverse. We could have tried the options and, tried that question. So the paper
yeah,
setter made it more tricky by giving it a range in the options.
When it come to quant, I can tell you my take on quant is that many of these algebra questions or even I actually like this particular paper. Most of this question looked very difficult. Well, it was like
Hmm.
presented in a fashion which is like 115,000 factorial. It looked sort of deadly, but actually many of these questions were actually pretty manageable. There were quite a lot of doable questions across board, but it was not like doable like I would say you do not have too many questions where I have seen this before or but how do I put this? I think that if somebody's concepts is conceptually clear hai, across the board, life would have been manageable. I think another thing is that you had sort of equal weightage for arithmetic and algebra, so you had that as a story here as well. That's my sort of basic take on this. Yeah, you guys, Gautam and Rohan, um, your
Yeah,
take on
Gautam, so
this.
you go first.
Sir, to be very true, see the paper. मुझे जो लगा in the first look was anybody who was strong with basic concepts of arithmetic and algebra definitely would be able to score high because algebra कुछ बहुत basic concepts है which probably was talking about function of, let's say, one of the question on quadratic was pretty straight that function has to be greater than equals to 0 and it attains its minimum value of 0 at 2, so f of 2 has to be basically 0. Then there were certain questions on arithmetic progression, but that was a tricky one. That was a lengthier one. Series के जो questions थे, because that was talking about the summation of terms. So that was a tough one. Even I would say when it comes to arithmetic, that was probably the saver in this paper. What I believe, time speed distance का question was little linked to geometry. Pythagoras triplet लग रहा था, but then the question on profit loss was easier. Simple interest was manageable. Expenditure वाला question manageable था. But the only point was the questions were not pretty said. You had to invest time, probably 2 to 3 minutes in most of the questions. Very few questions were like probably you can answer them in 30 seconds on 1 minute. So you need to probably keep patience, keep a hold. Targeting 10 to 12 questions probably would have been the right strategy for this paper. It's like spending time on each question rather than jumping down and probably trying to attempt the question in a minute or so.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the question was a little
Yeah.
confusing in the first look. Probably जैसे वो number system का जो question है वो that looks जैसे जीजू सर ने कहा was little probably was horrifying in the first one, like n factorial 15,000 factorial to be divisible by n factorial again a factorial. So in the first look probably the student would get confused was इतनी बड़ी figure है.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'll go question by question. I could recall few of the question. I'm not supposed to reveal the question, I'm sure, but I will give you some idea on the question. So one question was a plus 2b is equal to 6. You have to find the average of the maximum and the minimum marks of a and b, right? Typically, so those are the questions which if you feel ki algebra is scary or number of this integral solutions is asking, let me leave it. No, this was to be done. I think 4.5 was the thing which everybody would have got. 3 and 6, the minimum and the maximum values. Typically, if you look at the other question, for example, if I talk about time speed distance, as Gautam sir was pointing out, if you just look at by options, okay, 6 kilometers is the difference given to you, and there are 2 hours difference it is given. So it
Correct.
means 12 ka difference aana chahiye. 3, 4, 5 was the logic which you could have easily get. Even that interior angles and number of sides, I did it by counting. The ratio of number of sides was 1:2, and the ratio of interior angles is 3:4. So let's take a minimum छोटा से छोटा polygon ले लेते हैं triangle. तो 3 और 6 को करके देख लिया, नहीं हो रहा. 4 और 5 को करके, 4 और 8 को करके देख लिया, नहीं हो रहा. 5 और 10 में मैच कर गया, वही मेरा आंसर है. The jugards which you GP sir would have taught you and you would have learned from your teachers definitely works. I mean, need not to put it in an equation format also. So I believe overall paper was not very tough, as Gautam sir pointed out. I'd say 10 to 12 questions, wonderful, you could have done. There were questions which were tricky, there were questions which were time consuming and might be frustrating. जैसे वो APGP वाला, as he said, 100 को 1000 पे ले जाना है, रोज एक बढ़ रहा है. वो confusing language था on which day it will happen. Even time and work had questions which you could have left. If you're not good at that area of time and work, one question on mixtures was there. एक उसमें डालना है, इसमें डालना है. It could be time consuming. Apart from that, I think arithmetic was some questions on percentage, average, one question on typical elections, that was again, I believe, time consuming. 80% of the votes were invalid, 20% was one candidate, the other three got in the ratio 1:2:3. So those questions, if you have time, you could have done it, but agar aapke paas time nahi hai, to you could leave those questions. But overall, I would say moderate paper in terms of quant.
Yeah. So I think when I look at the paper, I think GP would have uh, allowed this lot of jugaadable thing, but it's
lot
all
of
about
lot
whether you actually did that in the question paper. Until people did not practice and try to implement those things in the mocks or at home preparing it, you will never be able to implement that in the actual reality. So this is. Uh, one is when you look at this expected percentile and the scores that we have mentioned, please do understand eventually the score is going to be scaled up down depending upon each of the slots. So here none of us have taken all the two slots. You have got certain number of people who have taken slot number one. You've got slot number two, and some people will take slot number three. This is are based on the basic experience and the judgment that we have in terms of what we are looking at with respect to the percentiles. Starting with VRC, we are looking at something like 40 to 42 marks to hit the 99 percentile and 20 to 21 marks to hit the 80th percentile. Just give me a second to give some idea on just 1 second. Okay. I have just to give you a reference point in terms of what it was last year's scale score. So the last year scale score of this would have been 45 last year, and this would have been close to about 22 last year. So we are basically our estimate at this point in time is, given that we have got a couple of odd sentences gone. How that plays is at this point in time difficult to say. Currently, we are going with the feeling that people may have skipped those questions. There was negative marking, may have skip one or two questions here. So therefore, it's likely that it will be one question down from last year. So if you're hitting, let's say that if you want to look at the cutoffs, most of the college will have cutoff at 80s and 85s. So 2024, very similar to last year, is the VRC story. When it comes to DLR, I believe again this is last. Just to give an emphasis, last year was 34, and this year we are predicting there will be a drop in DLR cutoffs. So likewise, if you're able to get one set out, you're likely going to clear the cutoff. And if you're able to get two sets and anything beyond two, will hit 99.5. And I'm sure that the person who got more than 99.5 percentile would have that score will be much higher. When it comes to quant, uh, you're again looking at a sort of a slight drop from last year. It's like it's not like it was like I said that you had to invest time in the questions, but by and large very similar to what we saw on also on the last. So if you want to look at about four to five questions, will help you clear the cutoff. About 12-13 questions net correct would hit you the 99 percentile. Here about 10 questions plus will help you hit the 99 percentile. Here about 14 odd questions net correct will hit the 99 percentile. About 7 to 8 questions net correct will clear the cutoff of VRC. About 5 questions net correct should clear the cutoff of DLR, and about 4 to 5 questions should clear the cutoff of QA. Overall, we are sort of predicting that the scores above this may be slightly less as well, but we are basically putting something that is close to 98, 99 ish. Last year, this score was 97, so is likely going to be overall score is will be the summation of these things. I'm sure that some people would have done better in one section or not. So they're likely the overall score is likely to remain very similar to last year, maybe 1 or 2 marks less. So if you got net 33 plus questions or 32-33 question net correct overall, then you're hitting the percentile. And if you want to get to IIM Calcutta, which is 99.5 plus or whatever, then you will probably require about 106, 107 marks. This is our estimate at this point in time. We will obviously encourage you to visit careerlauncher.com/cat You can go and input up your atoms, and what percentage of questions that you are likely, if you feel that you'll get correct, we'll get a little more data, we'll fine tune it, we'll be obviously getting more and more input. And in which case, another way to look at it is that you'll anyway get to know, right? At this point in time, the only thing that these kind of sessions will help you is just to understand, give you probably peace of mind, or whatever. We still have other battles to do, which is battles like IFT, then some may be taking snap, and there is that. There are a lot of things to be done, a lot of great colleges to be there. It's please bounce back as quickly as possible, and this has already happened. And that's it. Anything you want to add before I just, we have got first impression of slot 3 happening at 7, and we'll do a comprehensive one of all the 3 slots, our understanding at about 9:30 p.m. Anything, so we'll just put it here. Anything, Rohan and Gautam, before we close?
Uh, I probably would go with Jijo sir. As he said, probably the cutoffs are going to be slightly probably less for QA. I would disagree with Jijo sir with this PPT. So QA probably is going to be little less. Overall, definitely probably would be in this range.
QA little less, like already less किया मैं last year से
नहीं, I
or
think 99 last year was sir around 33. To best of my
30,
knowledge, Jijo sir. So sorry.
34 था, correct, sorry, हाँ
हाँ,
हाँ हाँ हाँ, correct, हाँ.
तो वो थोड़ा सा I
So,
probably is like little
हाँ
exaggerated. मतलब
हाँ,
personally
तो
first look I found it.
हाँ, तो इसको इसको एक सेकंड, I think let's
हाँ, ये
clarify this.
95 वाला 99 पे होना चाहिए था.
हाँ हाँ, तो ठीक है, ओके, ये 99 है, हाँ, ये
हाँ जी सर.
95 है, ये 90
डेफिनेटली
है,
सर.
या ये ठीक है, ठीक है, I think करेक्ट है, बराबर. We
Yes.
made
So
our
I would
course correction.
so I think this is something I would also agree to what Gautam sir said कि थोड़ा सा QA को slightly थोड़ा tougher end पे gain सकते हो, 1 or 2 question here and there, not much.
चलो, I think this would make better sense. Okay,
You know,
thank you all.
one question
Sorry.
coming from one of the students, he says 0 marks पे कितना percentile आएगा? Jijo, if you could
No.
answer that.
0 marks में मुझे हर साल 0 marks में ही percentile आता है. Okay, it depends upon how your slot is scaling up or scaling down. You'll get maybe 4 percentile, sometimes even 12, 13 percentile. Last year at 0 marks in DLR, I got 13 percentile. So you never know. It has to be. So the unfortunate thing is that in this case, because of the scaling down happens, it'll be very close to about 10, 50 percentile, maybe 1 or 2 also. All right, so we will close the session. And thank you so much. Please do visit careerlauncher.com/cat and put in and for more analysis. And we'll see you at 9:30 p.m. Goodbye.
Bye.